Hello and welcome back to Fleet Navigator, your trusted guide for the fast-moving world of fleet. I'm Russ Boulton, and this is our series Getting EV Right, where we explore the real-world challenges and opportunities when electrifying a fleet. In today's episode, we're focusing on something that every fleet eventually has to tackle, and that's charging infrastructure. Now, if there's one thing that we've learned over the last few years, it's that there's no single blueprint for charging. Every fleet has a different operational profile, different drivers, and different locations, which means that charging strategies need to be carefully designed rather than simply copied. And to help explore that, I'm joined by two people who know this space really, really well. First, Matt Dale, an independent consultant working with fleets, OEMs, and new technology providers across the EV industry. And Mark Evans, head of sustainability here at Avens, who also leads on facilities, giving him a really unique perspective on how infrastructure decisions actually get delivered in the real world. So I should probably say before we get started that both Matt and Mark are my former bosses. So it is a bit like getting the band back together. But obviously both head of consultancy when you were here. So Matt, do you want to give us a little bit of an overview as to where you went to, what you're doing now, and what you're dealing with on a bit of a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So I had a year in Paris. Fortunately, it wasn't a holiday. I was working for ALD International at the time, involved with EV charging, as normal. And then I went to join Mighty, the facilities management company, and set up their transport decarbonisation team, part of their broader sustainability team. Ran that until 2024, when I decided I'd had enough of corporate life and I was going to go and do my own thing.
What's wrong with corporate life? It's amazing, right?
It's brilliant. It's great if you're on the outside looking in. So I set up my own consultancy business, decarbonisation and transport, focusing on the EV journey. A lot of working with customers on their transition journey, manufacturers on how they can support customers on their journey, and a little bit in the CPO space and new technology that are helping customers on this journey. And it's all a big learning piece. A lot of what I do is actually around education as well as strategy and planning.
Perfect.
And absolutely loving it.
Happy days. Brilliant. And then Mark, obviously we were again head of consultancy. So now head of sustainability and facilities, is that right? Or
yeah, sustainability, community and workplace.
Right, okay. Mouthful.
Yeah, it is a bit of a mouthful, but it kind of follows on from a lot of what was done historically anyway with a lot of the stuff around EV, but taking it more into our own story, I guess, about how we're helping decarbonise.
Yeah.
And equally the facility side of things and looking at what our buildings are doing and how that works for our colleagues as well, and operationally.
Yeah, and I bet it's a bit of a poacher come gamekeeper, right? Because you've effectively now having to manage the other side of it. So we used to have a lot of conversations with customers around actually what they should do potentially around infrastructure. Are you seeing different challenges now when you sit on the other side of the fence?
I think you appreciate some of the challenges a lot more when you're actually having to deal with some of the processes, certainly around infrastructure, and I guess getting those decisions right. But I know that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. But yeah, suddenly having to make those decisions with different operational requirements makes it quite an interesting journey.
Challenge, a little bit different. Okay, so we'll kick off on the first one. So why infrastructure is never one size fits all. So Matt, fleets often assume that charging is quite simple, but it's not, is it? So where do you see the main challenges, or where are the first? Because obviously you do a lot of work with the AFP. We're platinum sponsors of the AFP this year again. When you're doing that training to maybe smaller fleets, and where are the first kind of assumptions, and where are they potentially a little bit misguided at first?
Do you know what? The AFP training is really interesting because we do both car and operational fleets. We run it as two different things. So the conversation, even taking it to that level, is really different between car and light commercial, car and operational. And it's finding the start of the sellotape, which came first. Very often the conversation tends to be around, I need some chargers. I need some chargers in the car park. I'm going to have 5. You sort of go, well, okay, why are you going to have 5? How many EVs are you having? Then you get it coming from the other side where people say, oh, how much power have you got? Have you got enough power to put infrastructure in? So there is many different start places in what will be the outcome. One of the key things we've tried to get across in that first piece in that training, though, is, okay, you've got to look at the infrastructure in different ways. You've got to look at home, you've got to look at workplace or depot, and you've got to look at public, and you've got to deal with them in a slightly different way. And you've got to understand how you're going to use each of them. Then you can start thinking about what you need to put in your car park. Because if your drivers are taking vehicles home every night, they've got off-street parking, and they can have home chargers, and you're on a fairly limited distance of travel, well, then your workplace or depot infrastructure might be really, really low, and you don't need to start that panic situation. I've got a customer at the moment out in Lincolnshire who is deploying a load of 125 vans, and they need public infrastructure to support them, and there's hardly anything out there. So they're having to put DC infrastructure at locations around their sites. So it's just, what's that start point? Actually, it's a piece of paper, and you write down everything you need to think about, from can I have home chargers? Can we do work? How does public work? What else do we need to think about? And I suppose one of the most important things is don't just think about today. A former colleague of ours used to say, if you're thinking about today, you're already running behind. I've got to think about what the whole thing's going to look like in the future. So that, again, we used to always say it, only dig the car park up once if you're going to put chargers in your car park. Because that's the most expensive bit, apart from the grid upgrade, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really good point. And I think one of the things that we've seen a lot is obviously you've got different charging, going back to that future-proofing, different charging speeds, and also different capabilities, but then also different fuel efficiencies as well. We're starting to see battery technology coming out now, which is actually far more fuel efficient. So when you take a kilowatt of energy, 1 kilowatt hour it translates into a different mileage now than it did do a few years ago as well. So that dependency. So it's this weird kind of scenario where the vehicle technology is improving, and actually the amount of power that you necessarily need to consume might be exactly the same, but you're getting more miles out of it as well, right? So it's which is something that I know that, Mark, you've been trying to balance, and I know we've had conversations about charging speeds and whether or not we go for, as an example, slow charging or slower charging, 7.5, 7.4 kilowatt hour charging, or whether or not we go for something like a DC but the problem is there's some operational challenges that come with that as well, right? Moving vehicles around, having vehicles charged within an hour is actually potentially problematic, and you don't want vehicles blocking. And this is a bit of a curveball, but I mean, I'm not sure if I've actually done the analysis myself, but in terms of comparing the cost of infrastructure upgrades to get some of that charging in there versus just using the public charging network, like we have an ability to calculate return on investment for home chargers, because you can quite quickly turn the amount of savings you'd have between home energy versus public charging energy as, you can see what the delta is between that, and then figure out how much energy you would take from the network before you'd actually pay for the charger at home. But have you ever done anything, Matt, I'm looking to you mainly, but have you ever looked to that and looked to the infrastructure and said, actually, you know what, forget the upgrades, use the public charging network? Or?
Yes, I have, in and around Manchester for a client, actually. So there are certain charge point operators who are really switched on for this. And actually, if you want to use their infrastructure, if you almost want to guarantee them amount of business or amount of time you'll use it, they'll give you one of their public chargers at certain times of the day. And if you are only running a small number of vehicles and you're not doing the mileage, then it can be cheaper to go and use a public charger at certain times of the day, be it first thing in the morning or last thing at night, even leave it overnight, depending on the security and what it looks like, rather than go to the effort of putting your own chargers into your own space and paying for the upkeep, especially if you're in a leased property where you are on a restricted time. So it's another element to look at and say, actually, have I got a public charger that is accessible to me, inexpensive or fairly inexpensive, versus my payback on investing £120,000 over 4 years to run four vehicles. And
the challenge is, if you're in a leased property and you say your return is over 4 or 5 years, but then you do actually move, you have paid for the infrastructure for the next. So it's quite. So the cost is, businesses are bearing that burden, aren't they? And sometimes that's definitely a bit of a challenge when you look at it. It does look eye-watering in comparison to, being real. Is if you look at diesel, no one's ever had to think about suddenly having this infrastructure cost as well. Right?
And that affects your investment decision, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you're in a leased property and you've got 10 years left on a lease, your investment story is really different than if you've got 3 years left on a lease. But we're in a kind of environment at the moment where people are trying to move quickly. If you've made a conscious decision that you want to electrify your fleet, but your property's not in sync with that, then you've got another challenge to deal with, you know. And it's not an insurmountable challenge, but you need to make very different considerations. Like you say, Matt, you know, if it's £120,000 investment over 10 years, that's a really different story to £120,000 investment over 3 years.
Yeah.
And the cost model just shifts all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've also got your landlord to think about.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And Mark, obviously, you've been with from the facilities side of things. You obviously are in a strong position from our point of view, because obviously you've got that fleet experience and you've been looking at it, and you're a stakeholder within that conversation, but you've got that fleet experience side. How important, I know, Matt, we've talked about it in different presentations over time, but that stakeholder engagement as well. And do you see that more now, that actually there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between what fleet's doing and what facilities are doing, and actually would you say to bring facilities into that conversation quite early on?
I think you absolutely have to, because you can't make a decision without understanding what the art of the possible is. And so you need to have that conversation with facilities to understand what can be done. You need to understand how that will work operationally. There's loads of stuff that if you were just quickly thinking about this in a room, you'd think, oh, the solution is we need 10 more chargers and that'll make it work. Let's go. But actually, as Matt said before, you've got to dig up.
Yeah.
Potentially you've got to do groundworks. Is the power capacity right? Where are you actually going to locate them? Does that have a throughput issue in terms of where vehicles are parking on your site? You know, there's loads of constraints you have to think about. And then you also have to think about how's that infrastructure actually going to work with you as a business? How are your drivers going to access it? How are they going to potentially pay for it? Or is the business going to pay for it? How's that whole model going to work? And what does that infrastructure look like? And so suddenly you start thinking, it's almost like a user journey. You've got to think about the driver, the colleague's journey of how they're actually going to access that, because you don't want it to be complicated. No. The last thing that anyone wants, and again, this ties in with different sorts of fleets, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because your requirement on a really fast-moving commercial vehicle fleet of how you access that power is different, as we say, to someone who's potentially got long dwell time. It's parking when they arrive, unplugging when they leave, and the vehicle's parked up charging at 7 kilowatts for 8 hours, say. That's a really different use case from someone who's got to tap in and tap out and get the next vehicle on that charger. But ultimately, the infrastructure that sits behind it, and you probably know what I'm going to say now, but you know, this is all about data and how the driver's user experience works, but how the data comes back into the business, and that data's got to be really good quality.
I think it's a really good point, because we've talked about this for many years about that profiling and that energy profile. You know, same vehicle, different driver, slightly different requirements, and then you bring in the fact that you've got dependence on public charging, workplace, or whether or not it's a home, and suddenly that total cost of ownership is completely different, isn't it, from vehicle to vehicle? Yeah. And then we've also got charge speed, haven't we? Matt and I, we've had this conversation as though we've got the tools and the calculators to look at it as well, but just vehicles consuming energy in a different rate actually can have an operational impact as well. And that's, again, from choosing the right infrastructure is key in that.
Yeah, it is. And I think we have to consider a couple of things. One being, we know, you and me, Russ, we've been in vans for a long time. Yeah. And we know that the technology coming into vans is always slower than it is in cars. So we have to recognise that this tech in blade battery now is not yet in light commercial vehicle.
No.
And it's brilliant that it's here, but if it's anything like electric windows and air conditioning work, will be another 3 years before it gets into light commercial vehicles. On the other side of that, the good news is that if your infrastructure charges your fleet now, it will also work when your fleet has better range.
Yeah.
So your investment is kind of long term. It's that question of how much you put in and whether or not you go for that £100,000 grid upgrade to get you your DC charger, because you might need it. But I think the way that the operational fleet is being looked at and the fears around it, I think charging is a lot of what's potentially holding it back at the moment, is that fear of well, it'll only do 150 miles. You know, we're not going to get what we need, so we need to put infrastructure here. We need to use the public infrastructure. They can't have a charger at home. They don't park the van on the drive, whatever it may be. So I think we need to take the learnings that we're getting from car and bring it into the operational van space in particular, and sort of go, hang on a minute. Every driver's individual. We recognise that. That's one big change that we saw with electrification. But we can still use that data and those learnings in an operational fleet space and really see, well, you can almost go back 4 years and go, your whatever it was you had, your car at the time, which is 250 mile range, well, that's where we are with the van now. So let's just look back at how you manage that. That's to what we need to do in the operational space, maybe.
Yeah.
Pick up on things like that.
And obviously, when we talk, and it's feels maybe a bit alien to some people, but we talk about home charging, and that is actually infrastructure still, right? So although it's from a personal point of view, but it's obviously from car point of view. Most people have gone down the car route, or that have gone down the car route, is usually they've been able to make it work and charge at home. Certain manufacturers have better charge pricing as well, so obviously it makes it far more cost effective to use on the public charging network. But in terms of what are the key points to really consider, and obviously let's just drill in a little bit as to where the advantages are from public and depot and home as well. I mean, just from a price point of view, we'll start there maybe.
Yeah, I mean, home is the ideal. Its dwell time is natural. You can have an EV tariff, which takes it down to anything from 6.5 pence a kilowatt hour upwards. So there is some big savings there. Again, a van driver, what's the benefit for them having an EV tariff? Because they're not getting the benefit of, it's the company that gets the benefit, and got new reimbursement solutions now from the likes of Right Charge and Power, who can over reimburse the driver to ensure that they're not out of pocket. But home is natural, it's logical. But we know that a lot of van drivers don't park their van on the drive at home. They park their car on the drive and they park the van on the road. You can drive around Bristol and see plenty of examples of that, and anywhere else. But the beauty with home is it's simple. You put a home charger in, you reimburse the driver for the energy they use, they get home, they plug it in, they unplug it the next morning, they go and do their job. In its most basic form, it is a van and a plug, or a vehicle and a plug, and that's brilliant. Yes, there's elements around it, and you've got to create a policy for your drivers and so on and so forth. But if you want to be really simple in the way that you start your EV journey, that low-hanging fruit we always talk about, find the drivers that can park their van at home, can have a home charger installed, and get some learning in.
And I think there's always, again, we've had this conversation so many times with different fleets, but there's always a reluctance. I don't want to put £1,000 unit, and obviously a lot less now. I don't want to put this unit onto someone's drive. What if they leave in 3 or 4 months? But actually, when you do that comparison, if you have that capability, you can really start to reduce and get the return on investment, potentially, depending on the fuel efficiency of the vehicle. Vans, not very fuel efficient, so they consume more energy. And also the price, the delta between the price. So if you can get that good energy price for at home, you can really get a very quick, I mean, we've seen it in 2 or 3 months. And effectively, you only need that driver to stay with you for 2 or 3 months, and it's actually paid. It's only the same as having that vehicle being used in the public charging network the whole time. There's a misconception there, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And there really is. But you can also turn it on its head. Why not have a conversation with your drivers that say, look, if any of you are thinking of leaving, don't take part in this. Don't have an EV yet. Or, actually, we're going to put you a charger in. If you're thinking of leaving, just considering it, tell us, and we'll exclude you. Because if you leave within the next 12 months, we're going to put a clawback in. So there are different ways to approach it. And it's not carrot and stick scenarios. It's reality for a business. If you're investing 750 quid in a home charger, why shouldn't you turn around to your driver and go, look, we are going to go electric. We're electric first now. We're going to reduce our carbon footprint. We're going to help you by putting a home charger in. However, if you leave within the next 6 months, we're going to claw some of that cost back potentially. Are you okay with that? Do you want to transition now? Not everybody's got to transition straight away.
No.
And it removes the barrier. It simplifies it.
You've also got to think about it in the context of how you want the vehicle to be charged long term. because if you're charging a home charger, you're probably looking at less than 2% a year battery degradation.
Yeah.
If you're charging on a rapid charger all the time, you're probably 3%, maybe even higher. So long term for the actual vehicle, for the asset itself, the best charging solution is that slow and steady. So if you can make that model work, you're also protecting the asset ultimately as well.
And especially with EVs, that we want to sweat the asset more, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you're getting everything out of that.
Yeah.
The slower charging definitely benefits. We actually we've got battery health tests from OBD reports and connected vehicle data as well now. And it's unbelievable to see how much of an issue battery degradation isn't.
Yeah.
But what we've seen is that the first generation tech had worse battery degradation because it didn't have quite the same thermal management, so it didn't keep the battery cool for long enough, or when it was taking that faster charge. But interestingly, you can also see the difference with certain manufacturers that might have given away free supercharging as part of their launch to the market. Those guys really have had quite a significant impact on the battery degradation, because if you had free charging, why would you ever charge at home? You're always going to fry that battery on the public, and it does have an impact. And a lot of time, if you're leasing it, that's maybe not necessarily as much of your concern, I suppose. But again, if you do want to run that fleet for longer, you want to try and make sure that you're not seeing that degradation, especially on LCVs, which are, you're potentially looking at quite fine margins in terms of range that you've got there at the moment as well. Mark, in terms of, obviously we're saying about the home, and then we've also talked about public, but kind of coming back to the office or depot charging, what have you thought about maybe offering out the charging services when we're not in the office, and how can that work in the local community? Going back to your community piece, of course, the doing the right thing for the local community.
So there's loads of stuff around this, isn't there? Being able to share those potentially with local businesses that could benefit with overnight charging. You know, if you're in an operational site like this, where traditionally office hours or extended day around office hours, that's when our charging cycle is, and there's very little charging done overnight, then that kind of makes sense, and it sounds really easy, doesn't it?
Theoretically.
But then you've got to think about site access, your neighbours, what that actually means from an insurance perspective. You've also got to think about how you're offering that, because do you then suddenly become a charge point operator? And then you've got another layer of sort of legislation and requirements to work around. So there's lots of other things to think about in that mix.
And it's a really interesting, because I think the concept of sharing is like, oh, it's great, well, we'll just make it available for you. But actually, it's a lot more complicated, especially when the vast majority of fleets, especially commercial fleets, they operate at the same time. So they might need the charging at the same time. It's about making those connections, isn't it? A lot more.
Yeah.
And again, going back to Mark's point, it's not as simple as you might think. You probably, the concept might come from fleet managers say, oh, well, we'll just share with another fleet that's just down the road. But then you need to get all the same stakeholders from both sides, from both businesses, to then start having those conversations. So it can take a bit of time to plan. But have you ever seen it working really, really well? Obviously, you talk about your Lincolnshire or...
I have seen it work on AC infrastructure where a business is using their customer's infrastructure with regularity.
Okay.
So one of the strategies we used to have when I was at Mighty was helping customers understand where their vehicles dwell and putting infrastructure in there for their customer to use.
Sure.
That works.
Yeah.
And when you've got a vehicle that goes in there 3 times a week, it's there for 4 hours, it gets priority to the charger.
Yeah.
The charger is utilised by the company, the business, the rest of the time, and they just pay for the kilowatt hours. So it can work in certain aspects. On a large scale, your car park down here, open it in the evening. No, I personally haven't seen it. I've heard people talk about it a lot. And I think it's that, if you're talking operational fleet, it's how much... How confident are you going to be that you're always going to be able to get on those chargers for your fleet when it's not your infrastructure? And that is operational, potentially taking a vehicle off the road and sort of going, hang on. So you almost need a plan B. Maybe that plan B is, was a public charger down the road so I can go and jump on that if it's not available.
And it's a really good book because we do this a lot with EV. When you look at EV reimbursement as an example, and when you start looking at people using public charging explicitly, you go, that's going to be really high on total cost of ownership. It's going to consume the most expensive energy. All of it's coming from there. But when you actually look at it over the peaks and troughs, and you actually look at the vast majority of your fleet is actually able to charge at home, these exceptions, that it's not that bad actually to use the public charging, even if they're 100% on it, because the total energy that one vehicle consumes within a whole fleet is actually watered down quite significantly. So whilst you could potentially be paying 2-3 pence per mile, even if you had, say, 30% of your fleet, depending on the network, you might still only be paying 9 pence per mile. When you look at it from a typical wet fuel price per mile, it's still better, right? So it's not always just a case of this is an extreme issue, and as a result, we've got to avoid it. Sometimes it is a case we could probably absorb that if you've got the right mix of charging, right?
This is something that we've spoken about loads over the years, isn't it? That when you do a cost model, a lot of people look at the absolute worst case scenario and cost around the worst case scenario. And actually, if you've got data to support looking at a real use case, your worst case scenario might only be 5% of your fleet. So why make a decision based on 5% of your fleet? And that works for car or LCV or any solution. If you've got a solution that works for 90% of your fleet and it's a bit difficult around the edges, concentrate on that 90% because that's the bit that stacks. And if it costs a little bit more, your overall average cost is just going to balance out. Isn't it?
Still balances.
Let's be honest. Any fleet is on a journey. There is no option. You have got to go down the route of electrification. That's what the legislation says. That's what Europe and the broader globe is doing. And if you don't start with that 10, 20, 30, 90% of fleet, you're not going to learn in time. And when you do make that change, it's going to be a really big shock, and it potentially will knock your operation in a big way.
And think about that from a sustainability perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you go with 30% of your fleet today, that's 30% of your fleet that is not emitting outside of production. But
tailpipe.
At the tailpipe, ultimately, you're emitting nothing from today. And you're not going to replace those with ICE vehicles. So you've got 30% of your fleet that for the next 10 years is EV. If you don't make that decision today, you're just compounding the amount of carbon you use. And we've modeled this in the past for customers, and you actually, if you make a decision to go now and go as much as you can, it's exponentially impacted that over a sort of 10-year period. So why not do it? Why not make that first step if you've already made it? And let's be honest, most businesses in the UK now have made first steps. Car fleet.
Okay, car fleet,
It's a bold claim.
But most businesses are definitely thinking about it.
Oh, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's probably a lot of businesses at the moment that probably look at it, stare down the barrel of it, and think that looks complicated. And there's probably enough to put a lot of people off, saying, I'll just kick the can down the road. Maybe fleet managers looking and going, that could be someone else's problem in a few years' time. But we're starting to hit that time where we are 100%, you need to do something, right? And you need to start moving in some way in order to start making that transition. So you're not going to have that compounded issue, which is,
There's a scary one, and it's another subject completely. But if you look at the ZEV mandate, let's ignore cars for a minute because cars is easier. If you look at the van ZEV mandate, late 28, early 29, we hit 50-50. 50% electric, 50% ICE. Last year, we were 10%. So 3 years, one life cycle, 50-50. Now, I'm going to be a little cynical here.
Not like you.
We were around during COVID, and we know what the manufacturers did during COVID. So when you are 50-50, are the manufacturers going to move that ICE product into more profitable areas? Most likely. Why wouldn't they? They've got to make their money back that they're losing at the moment. So there is a new dynamic coming in that is going to impact on the infrastructure you need to put in and how you plan your home charging and your public charging. That is, hang on a minute, 50% operational fleet 3 years from now. you're not physically going to be able to buy those diesel vehicles.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and if you don't start looking at your infrastructure and thinking about your drivers, it could be a major problem for a lot of people. And I agree. I think most car fleets are in that space now where if they haven't started, they get in there. I think in the operational space, from analysis that we've looked at, all of us over time, we know that probably less than 50% of the operational fleets have started.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's you're going to get stuck in a revolving door. That's I'll do it next time. Do it next time.
Yeah. And that's one of the interesting kind of processes in this, isn't it? Because we've all been in this industry for a very long time. So very long time. But 25 years ago, if you sat down and you looked at your commercial vehicle fleet and you made a decision, you were quite comfortable that the decision you made was right for 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
You sat on that decision. And so you knew, you had the knowledge to say, right, that's what the vehicle's going to do. That's what maintenance is going to look like. We're refueling it at the thousands of petrol stations all around the country. So we know how that's going to work. That model's great. Let's not even think about it. And in 6 years' time, we'll do the same thing because that's what the model is. Yeah. So we'll look at the cost. We'll look at everything else. We'll look at vehicle suitability, all that sort of stuff. We'll look at TCO even. But actually, we're not going to change our model. Mm-hmm. If you take that mindset now and you think, right, we've made a decision today that electric vehicles don't work for our business, so I'm not going to change that decision for the next 5 years because I'm always in this 5-year cycle.
It's a great point.
If you think back 5 years ago now and look at what's changed in terms of EV and infrastructure and everything else, and you just think about this site here, we moved in here in 2018 into this site. I think
it's 2017, 2018, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Limited infrastructure on site, fine for where we were then. Infrastructure around us, nothing. I mean, there was nothing around this area at all. Yeah. So you don't look at that and you don't think about it, and we've got on with what we're doing. There's actually 30 rapid chargers within 1 mile of this site now. And we're sort of, North Bristol. There's 30 rapid chargers within 1 mile of us. And that's infrastructure that's gone in over the last 5 years. And you extrapolate that out across the whole network. The story that you looked at even 2 years ago is different from the story today. The operational requirements are different today because it's just changing so quickly.
Mm-hmm. I suppose from your point of view, Matt, in terms of doing the analysis, if you did analysis 2 years ago, it is 100% worthwhile renewing that Absolutely. Within 2 years because, to Mark's point, the world has moved on so quickly. Yeah. I mean, are you seeing that? Are you seeing that actually almost the work that you do is quite, not outdated, but it's the world's moved within 6 months of submitting that?
It is not quite 6 months, but not far off. No. It is that case of going, right, we can do a 5-year strategy. This is what it looks like. This is the plan for the replacement. But after 18 months, 2 years, you are actually, a lot of customers now, a lot of clients, they actually go, right, this is what we'll do. And then we start working again on it 12 months later. But from a fleet perspective, how often does your operation change anyway? We're in a world of change. We're in a time of change. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's kind of like, well, we'll do this now, but just bear in mind, as technology moves, as charging capability moves, as charging locations move, as drivers change their attitude, and so on and so forth, everything is a constant,
moving feast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without a doubt. So in terms of the suppliers, I mean, obviously, we're becoming a bit more mature. I think when we first looked at this site and the suppliers that we chose for this site, we didn't have a huge amount of options. There's a lot more options now, but I mean, where would you say the biggest improvements need to be from the supplier? Like where are the suppliers missing out, and what would our customers need to be wary of when dealing with suppliers for, say, depot charging or infrastructure? We'll start with depot first, and workplace.
So for me, the fundamental change over the last few years is OCCP compliance, and so let's be totally realistic. The first chargers that were fitted 7 years ago were pretty dumb units, if you like. They performed a job, and that is all they did. You got very little limited data from them. They were in a totally enclosed infrastructure, no data sharing out of it. You actually look at some of the solutions now, and businesses that we speak with, and there are so many systems now with OCCP compliance, and the fact that you can now take data from multiple different charging providers and put it in one platform, then suddenly from a fleet manager, from an operational point of view, it kind of doesn't matter what decisions you made a couple of years ago, as long as those charge points can all speak with a central set of data, you can kind of change how you manage it centrally and plug that data in. And there's so many providers out there now who are taking that data and aggregating it from multiple providers. So from an operational point of view, probably 6 or 7 years ago, you could make a mistake because you could pick the wrong supplier. Now, I would suggest that, there's always going to be scenarios, but actually, whatever you've got fitted, you can probably get data from it.
Yeah.
And if you can get data from it, then you can check. It's not like we want to double the number of chargers that we've got on site, so we're going to rip out all the old ones and replace them with double the number of new ones.
Yeah.
You can actually look at it and make a much more sensible decision and say, actually, they've got another 3 or 4 years life on them. We'll keep them. We'll get 10 new ones, potentially from the same provider, potentially from someone completely different.
Yeah.
But operationally, no impact because we're pulling it through the same set of data. And, this is another one of those things that we've talked about loads already, that things are just moving on. People are recognizing some of the challenges and then developing solutions to deal with those challenges.
Yeah. We should just say OCCP is open. I can never remember it, but it's an open protocol.
Open charge.
Yes.
Open charge protocol, which basically allows all chargers to effectively communicate in a similar way, so you can get a minimum standard of information out of those chargers. So you can do things like you were saying, Mark, aggregate that data, get way better insights. Whereas the chargers that we might have fitted originally, I look at the one that's on my home when I first transitioned, really is quite outdated now. It doesn't
quite
really,
a brick.
It's a big brick.
Yeah,
it's a big old unit. Mrs. still hates it. She still hates it every time she drives past it. But yeah, obviously the world has moved on in that short space of time. And then we'll move on a little bit to a bit of a quirky one that we're working with at the moment. And it's kind of mentioned about battery health and recycling, that circular economy. We've got a partnership now with Felton. So it's this battery storage. So it's actually deployable battery or deployable energy to different sites. So it's brilliant for construction, as an example, where you've got temporary sites. Well, going back to what we were saying right at the beginning, if you've got a lease site, you don't necessarily want to put that infrastructure in, pay for the infrastructure to be to go into the site. You could potentially have a deployable unit. We're seeing that not just from Felton, in fairness, there's other companies coming out there, but that's a bit of a game changer, right? In terms of, I know, Mark, you were looking at it for not just charging, you were also looking at it as a backup power pack effectively for the building potentially, And
I think it's another one of those cases where something has been developed and there is an absolute use case for it. You mentioned sort of sites that have no current infrastructure but need EV charging. What a brilliant solution. The circularity angle of it as well, where it's using old EV batteries, is brilliant. Really, really clever, really intelligent. And one of the benefits of that is that because they're built for a car, then they've got so many more. They're at the peak, aren't they? They've got to pass so many tests to be fitted to a car, to be safe for a car, that
you put it in a static box.
It's got some pretty safe, or some pretty strong safety protocols around it. And so 100% there's use cases for them, and we've looked at some options, and it goes back to that use case point, doesn't it? It's if you can find there's so many options out there. If you can find a case that works for your operational requirements, then there are different solutions out there, and it's not just as simple as saying, "Oh, I need more access to grid energy." And there are other things that you can do. There are other things you can think about. Generating your own energy, bringing different energy sources on site. If your operational site isn't used extensively at night, can you harvest that energy overnight and use it during the day? There's loads of options to consider. It's not just a simple, we've got to do that one thing. So there's a lot to play with.
We've probably not got time for it today, but vehicle to grid is like another one again, where you start looking at these assets to actually push energy back at the right time into the grid or into actual sites as well. So there's a lot more. There is a lot. It could be a little bit scary. So I suppose. Go on. Sorry about.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Vehicles are X, wherever it's going is an element of conversation. But I think in current time, BES is far more important.
Yeah.
Using battery energy storage solutions as a way not to have a grid upgrade.
Yeah.
I've got a customer at the moment. We're just installing a BES with a 120 kilowatt DC charger.
Right.
So that their vans, when they're dropping past, it's a site that they drive through, but they don't
stock energy.
15 minutes. We've only got a 100 amp supply. And grid upgrade was £125,000.
Wow.
So it took a 260 kilowatt BES. Charge it overnight from the 100 amp supply.
Great price you'd be buying it for.
Absolutely. Then release it during the day, but it still gets a element of the supply because the location is office storage. So they were able to put in a 120 kilowatt twin gun charger so that their drivers can pop in for 10, 15 minutes, top up, get to their next job, get home, get to their first job in the morning without the inconvenience of, the whole thing has cost less than the DNO grid upgrade was.
Exactly. And they're already getting that return on investment straight away.
Well, the return straight away. Yeah. It's a leased building.
Yeah.
5 years. Train it out, move it somewhere else afterwards. Yeah, exactly. That and the charger is too.
You'd be able to sweat that asset for so much longer. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, the cycles are really good on them.
Yeah.
So it is. And I think maybe we focus too much on V2. And actually we can focus on helping customers in more practical ways with things like, the best solution that's out there.
And it's getting that modelling, isn't it? We talk about TCO, but then this is like, you've really got to look at it in a slightly different way. So, I mean, we've talked about a lot, like the infrastructure is massive. And I feel like we've only just started really scraping where we could go. So it's the proper nerds in us have really come in. Yeah. In terms of, if you were to dilute all this and distill this down, for anybody that's thinking about looking at infrastructure and maybe not made the move, or even if they had started to make the move, what would you say the one key takeaway that you'd say to focus on at the moment to really, as your starting point for, it's a big one, but.
Okay, so I'm going to focus on operational.
Yep.
On vans and operational fleet. And I'm going to say the same thing that I've always said is low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Start with the simple and get your learnings. Your infrastructure into your car parks and your depots aren't going to be the start point unless you've got a back-to-depot fleet. So if you've got back-home fleet, think about the people that can have a home charger, who's suitable to transition to electric, focus in there. If you're back to depot, look at the vehicles that are doing the mileage that are really suitable for an EV, identify the drivers who are going to be able to switch and are willing to switch to an electric vehicle, and then work your infrastructure out by how many vehicles you've got, how many are going to transition by a certain time, how much power you've got. Yes, you only want to dig the car park up once, but don't make the list so big. You were saying before about looking down the barrel of the gun and you go, it's too much. Keep it simple. Maybe even start just using public charging.
Yeah.
You've got a 500 vehicle fleet, get 10 vehicles.
Swallow the costs.
Swallow it, see how they work, see how your drivers operate with. Keep it simple.
Perfect. Mark, from a facilities point of view, put your facilities hat on there.
I think as an extension of what Matt's actually just said, do it, go for it. Go for that low-hanging fruit, but always consider what you need to know, and then make sure you're getting the data from your first steps or your second steps, your third steps, wherever you are. Make sure that you're getting the data from it from day one to make the informed decisions, because there's nothing worse than 2 years down the line going, I think this is working, but we haven't got the data to support it. Make sure you're getting the data.
Yeah. Had a customer that did that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I think that has been a fascinating conversation, to be fair. I could carry on talking. That is the nerd in me. But that's, I'm in good company, I think. So we're all right. Well, thanks so much for your time, guys. And thanks for the insights. And hopefully there's plenty there for anyone that's listening or watching to take away and start considering for EV infrastructure. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, Ross. Be sure to keep an eye out for the third and final episode of this series, Not All EVs Are Created Equal. And for more insights, be sure to visit avens.com. Thank you. See you next time.